Okay, welcome everybody to our third roundtable discussion with ASI. And today, my name is Leora Levy. I work with ASI, the International Sommelier Association, and today it's all about packaging, alternative closures, and attitudes about this around the world. Open-mindedness versus rituals, how honored we are today to be having two leading experts on innovation in the wine world. Welcome Stefan from Vinventions and Robert Joseph, aka the Wine Thinker.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. We also have our sommeliers from all corners of the globe here to talk about their experiences with alternative closures and packaging in 4 very different markets, ranging from ultra-conservative to hyper-alternative, namely New Zealand, Mexico, Denmark, and Monaco. And just want to introduce everybody before we continue. We have from New Zealand, we have Tori Haysom. Hi, Tori. It's late at yours now.
Yeah, 1 a.m.
We have Nina Jensen from Denmark.
Hello, guys.
We have Bruno Scapo from Monaco. And we have Manuel Negrete from Mexico, very early at yours.
Yeah, good morning with coffee.
Good morning with coffee. We're going to open today's session by talking about some of the science behind closures from one of the wine world's leading lights. Stefan Vidal, he is the head of innovation and general manager Europe for Vinventions, and he will be our expert eye today on everything dealing with closures, both traditional and alternative. So with Stefan, he's been leading, or you joined Vinventions in 2007 after leading the Rhone Valley Wine Interprofession Laboratory. So please tell us a little bit about yourself and Vinventions.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Leora. Yeah, in fact, I joined the company Vinventions in 2007, so now it's quite a long time. And I was the head of the laboratory of the Rhone Valley Wine Labs, like you just said. When I joined the company, that was with a very critical mission. That was to better understand wine science and what are the factors that are really leading wine evolutions when wine is in a bottle. And through our different lines of closures, we wanted to know what is the impact of oxygen onto wine evolution, and if we could predict that, and then if we could master that, so that the wine evolution is always under control and is exactly like the winemaker intended. So we did a lot of things, and especially we built a very, very strong academic partners program with all the academic partners, the wine research institutes around the world, working together on the same topic of wine evolution in a bottle based on oxygen management through the closure. So that was very, very interesting. And from now on, I developed myself, following my career path within Vinventions, and now I'm heading the innovation department as well as the Europe region for us. So I'm general manager of Europe for Vinventions.
Well, I think none of us will be bored with all the things you're going to be able to tell us about this today, because, well, the research you've been doing and all the things that you've accomplished with Vinventions is just amazing. But you've seen a number of changes in the market over time, I guess. What, in your opinion, has been the most significant change to closures in the last decade?
Well, so before talking about the last decade, let's start with the beginning, probably, two decades or 3 decades ago. In fact, why are we talking about alternative closures today? It's because we had to address one issue that was TCA, cork taint. That was the starting point, right? And so that was the first focus. And if you look at 20 years ago, in the rear window, in fact, this is what you see: alternative closures coming TCA-free. That was the first driver of the development. But in the last decade, for me, it's 2 main drivers. I talked already a little bit during the introduction of oxygen management, and that's really something that is important on 2 aspects. The right amount of oxygen delivered to the bottle, so you have the right development of the wine to reach what I like to call the sweet spot. You have a wine that will develop, that will mature, that will ripe, to a point that the wine is just perfect. But you need some amount of oxygen. Can be small, can be moderate, can be high, and it depends on the wine profile, on the what was done during winemaking and things like this. So that was really the last decade where we started to talk about, oxygen transfer rate, oxygen ingress, oxygen management. All this was really a strong driver of closure development. And the last one that is probably in the last 2-3 years that is now really boosting, it's everything that is linked to sustainability. And people from wineries, from estates, from big wineries around the world are concerned about environmental concerns, things having an impact on the environment. And what is important is that it's quite difficult of a topic. And so our customers are asking for transparency. They want to know why we embark into that direction or that direction. That's very important for them to understand. So if you make a choice for, let's call it very simply, for the planet, what does it really mean, and what am I really doing? And that's this transparency level on sustainability matters that is becoming the new ask from our customers, if you will.
I can imagine. I think it's very important also to be transparent these days. But Vinvention has put a focus not just on finding alternative closures, but to establishing sustainable solutions that also reflect the individual needs of the wine in the bottle. What factors do you take into account when deciding on the proper closure for any single bottle?
Yeah, so this is where it's interesting, because first and foremost, the first driver was really the wine profile. So we were after some wine development and characteristics, and based on what we could understand from the winemakers, from what they were doing during the winemaking and their objectives in terms of distribution of the wine and bottle aging, shelf life, let's say, we could recommend oxygen route, I would say, oxygen ingress. But now with the sustainability related matters, it's important to understand the full strategy of the wineries, of the estates. Whether they want to embark upon circular economy, or if they want to be more in phase with climate change solutions. So you need to really address carbon footprint or things like this. And then you have another category that will be more linked to the fact that they want to deal with natural, biodegradable, compostable solutions and things like this. So you see, you have already 3 pillars to address sustainability matters, actually. And so we try to give the right solution depending on the winery strategy. And we try to fit to that.
Custom made, we can call that.
Almost, yeah.
Almost. But innovation is one of the cornerstones of Vinvention's mission statement. Yet the wine industry is a heavily traditional one, and it's not really known for embracing change, I guess. What do you see as the biggest innovation on the horizon?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? Because it's difficult when you talk about innovation and to think about a very traditional industry. But at the same time, if you look again, in the details, you see that probably it's not that this industry is really tend to change, is that it takes longer. And so you see innovation will take longer. The cycle for innovation are a little bit longer, but at the end of the day, we make real improvement, right? And so in terms of the next real thing that is going to happen, I'm convinced, based on the discussion that I can have with many winemakers, many winery owners around the world, that the sustainability aspect will become really key. And so all the packaging will have to embrace that. We're going to go for even lighter bottles. If you think about a bagging box, you will go to something that will probably be monopolymer of some sort, right? So you can recycle it. And in the arena or the domain of the cylindrical closures in a seals, I think that's what will become, that will be the new, let's say, the new tradition, or the new natural, if you will, where we're going to use compounds, materials that will be even better for the environment than the natural cork is, for instance. Because if you think about a natural cork, the water footprint of a natural cork, you need to think about that. You know, when you read that some forests are irrigated, is it really the way to go? So you think about that, and when you think about sustainability, you need to think about the full life cycle analysis. What are all the benefits and all the drawbacks? And then you really look at the balance. And so I'm convinced that we will go for materials. And that's funny, because when you look at innovation these days, you look at all these guys are putting new materials on the market almost every day. Today, honestly speaking, they are not even in quantity, in sufficient quantity, so we can even do tests, right? This is really scarcity for the moment, but they will come available, and we need to make sure that we are exploring all the possibilities to develop real sustainable solutions at packaging. And I'm confident, because innovation departments and innovation people are like for that kind of challenge, right? We have to invent our future, and so the new natural will be probably our solutions for the future.
Well, I think everyone has had to learn how to embrace change this past year. Maybe that will have an effect on wineries as well, and how they embrace the change that needs to come in many aspects of the wine world. Now we're going to introduce. Thank you so much, Stefan, by the way.
My pleasure.
And for those of you who don't know Stefan, he's obviously also not only the general manager of Europe for Vinventions, but Vinvention is also a gold partner of ASI. So we are very lucky to drag them around, to drag them around all over the world when we do events and things. So that you always make for a lot of very interesting masterclasses, I must say. Yes. Now we're going to introduce someone who don't really need an introduction. Robert Joseph has never been a sommelier in the real meaning of the word, but he did serve wine in his parents' restaurant in the south of England, which is where he fell under the spell of the product and learned to respect everyone involved in it. Throughout the past decades, he has done so many things. He's a writer, a critic, a publisher, and his website says Wine Thinker. Robert, how are you?
I am good, thank you. I'm fascinated. I've been following the Vinvention story, and in fact, because I'm very old, I remember the days when actual synthetic corks were new. I remember going to a place called Supreme Cork near Seattle, as it was, and signing a confidentiality agreement not to tell anyone about these things I was seeing or how they were made. And in those days, synthetic corks were all funny different colors, and they looked very odd, almost medical. And it was the new thing. Bill Gates had invested in these things. And there was a lot of argument about how hard they were to get out of the bottle or back into the bottle, and whether wine breathed or didn't breathe, and so on. And Supreme Cork doesn't exist now. It's been replaced by Noma Cork, which is, of course, part of Stefan's business. And then Screwcaps came along. And in the middle of all this, and I'd been to Portugal, and I'd seen the cork manufacturers in those days. And the word sustainability did not apply in those factories to the workers' fingers. I mean, quite seriously, it was like stepping back into the 19th century. There was the equipment was old-fashioned. They were still using bleach. It was extraordinary. And I also discovered how they did the checking, and they didn't check. No one checked for TCA in those days. And then I remember asking in the Bordeaux chateaus, and Jancis Robinson wrote about this, even the first growers didn't check for TCA. And nobody has complained. There's no problem. We do not have any problem with cork wine because nobody says. Great, I've had it. Everyone, and I was running the International Wine Challenge. We had 9,000, 10,000 wines, and we were seeing the percentage of TCA. And it was huge. And at these times, the lovely people and the cork manufacturers, about whom you can begin to imagine how I felt, were running very big campaigns telling people that plastic corks cause cancer, telling children to tell their parents not to use any synthetic cork or anything else because of the birds, the eagles and the lynxes in the forest. They had Prince Charles doing stuff. You name it. There was money being thrown everywhere. So at around 1990 something, I started something online called corkwatch.com, which was just designed to put the truth out of different closures out there. It wasn't aligned with anybody or anything, but it was because no one was actually talking the other side of the story. And then, of course, Australia and New Zealand came along with the Screwcaps, and I knew some of the people behind those campaigns and the extraordinary speed at which that took off, led by obviously the Clare Valley in New Zealand, and then the Sauvignon producers, particularly in New Zealand. So this was all rolling. And there was a moment where I could see it all happening, that the cork was going to be against the ropes, and we're going to see all sorts of other things happening. And then DiAM came along, and I was involved in some of the tests. There was a thing before that called Accor, which was an appalling agglomerate closure, which actually didn't taint some bottles, it tainted all bottles. You could actually smell the wine and know that it had that kind of closure. That was replaced by DiAM. And I've watched as DiAM came along. And then, of course, we had the other story that sommeliers in the room will know about. Everybody knows about, but nobody talked about white Burgundy. 2-year-old, 3-year-old bottles of white Burgundy, dark brown. And nobody saying anything. And me saying to one of the top critics in France, I won't name him, but you can guess, there are only one or two that he's likely to be. And I was saying to him, and he knows and loves Burgundy, I said, nobody talked about this. Just as nobody talked about Rue de Cognac wine and nobody talked about Rodenstock and so on. And he said, no, we don't talk about it, but I don't buy white Burgundy anymore.
Well, that's a solution.
So I thought, great. Anyway, my point is that we could see this all happening, and yet this is 20 years after the Screwcaps came into New Zealand. And to me, two things have happened. One, we have seen an improvement in the quality of corks. Yes, of course we have, but they're still not perfect. We still get bad bottles, and we are still getting random oxidation happening as a problem. And if you want the perfect cork, which will guarantee not to have TCA, and it may or may not do that, but apparently it does. I'm not absolutely sure it's guaranteeing me the consistency of air ingress from cork to cork, but I'm going to pay a lot of money for that. I'm paying €3, whatever, a ludicrous price for something to stick in the top of a bottle. Second thing is, we are in the year 2021, and we're all talking about using 75 centiliter glass containers that are the size they are because of the lung capacity of a 17th century glass blower. We are talking about containers that used to be used for liquid that was at 10, 11% alcohol. We're now putting 16% Zinfandel into the same size bottle as we used to 11. And we think that's normal. Oh, well, half bottles, they're a hassle. And 50 centiliters, no one wants it. And now we're having this other discussion, which Stefan has just alluded to, by some of my friends, Francis Robinson, Tim Atkin, and others, saying, we hate heavy bottles. Environmentally, they're a disaster. Of course they are. So let's have light bottles. So let's put every single wine that's in a bottle in a light glass bottle. So we're already doing that, for goodness sake. We're putting €2 wine at the moment in the same packaging as €200 wine, except that at the moment, the Chateau Laffitte's in a slightly heavier €200 glass bottle than the two. But we don't want that. We want them all in the same glass bottle. And we want people to go into supermarkets and to see something that with a really pretentious label on it that looks exactly like the Chateau Lafite, barring a few words and the logo. And we say, well, you don't buy this, you buy that. So we are a very, very screwed up industry. I'm sorry, Stefan, we do not evolve very quickly. You say we don't evolve, it takes time. I question why half the wine is in bottle of any kind in the first place. I question why, Tori, I'm sorry about this, but the rocket is aimed at New Zealand. My New Zealand friends, I was talking to 2 Australians, New Zealanders this morning online, they are as dogmatic about Screwcaps as the cork people were about cork. So we've got the great god cork over there and the great god Screwcap there, and nobody said, well, what if there was something else? Like Vinoloc came and it's sitting there and nobody talks about it. And the Screwcap followers hate DiAM. Oh, we've got a taint with DiAM. It's not no taint. So they've decided that Screwcap is the answer. And the cork people are still out there saying, no, ours is the only way. So I love Inventions. They gave me an award, so obviously I love them a lot. But I love them because they're covering all of the bases. But I also want to see more different things.
But you know, Robert, that's very interesting that you're saying that, because obviously everyone understands how enthusiastic you are about packaging and closures and how you've been following this for so many years. And when we were sitting with my colleagues, Paula Sidor and Claire Bertica, who are back office with us today, and we were thinking, okay, who should we invite for this this webinar? And your name came up, but at that point, we didn't know that you'd had actually won an award from Vinvention in 2018. So that came as a surprise before we contacted.
It did to me as well, so I was very happy about it.
Yeah, but in 2018, you received the Vinvention's Innovation Award. And at that time, you said, packaging will change. There is no reason for 90% of the world's wine to be in 75 centiliter glass bottles. And we're now 3 years and one pandemic later. Did the change that you predicted, has any of it come to fruition, you find?
Well, it's been the last year has been a very weird year, as we all know. So we've, and obviously the sommeliers in the room know better than me just how it's affected the on-trade. But what has happened, of course, is that people have been drinking at home more. And some of them have been pulling out their bottles of Lafite to drink now rather than keep them for another 25 years. But otherwise, other people have actually been drinking on a daily basis at home rather than going to the bar or the pub. So one of the things we have seen is some move towards bigger formats. So the Bagnum, the 1.5 litre bag pouch thing, which has actually picked up. Apparently in the UK, we've seen a 300% increase in sales from one of the UK retailers, but from a very low base. Bag and box has gone up a lot. And certainly there is a feeling that that's happened. And of course, the other thing that we're seeing is cans. And cans have come in, particularly in the US. None of this, of course, affects the world of fine wine and sommeliers very much, because you're not going to be out there with a pouch with a tap on the side, or a can particularly. But it's certainly coming in. And one of the things that we're seeing from almost the two sides, one is I don't want to drink more wine. I probably want to drink less wine than I do. But you know, we've had all this thing, which gadget do I use to keep the wine in my 75 centiliter bottle fresh? If I didn't have to have a 75 centiliter bottle, I wouldn't need the gadget. So the bag in box works, the pouch works, or we're seeing more and more small formats. And that's also relevant in a household where somebody wants to drink white wine and somebody wants to drink red wine. And somebody, you know, so essentially, I think that the 75 centiliter size is under great fire now, because it is not necessarily the right size. I mean, Sauternes, could one of you in this room tell me why anybody is putting Sauternes in a 75 centiliter bottle in 2021 unless it's for banquets? Anybody?
And if it's for a banquet, you could just as well put it in a 3 liter bottle, right?
Yeah, and they do that too. But you see what I'm saying? And, you know, the world is full of bottles of half-finished port and Sauternes after dinner parties, where not even a half full. You know, basically, everyone's had a little to taste and they've enjoyed it. They don't want very much.
But which one would you say would be the packaging that has the best possibility for success?
No, I don't. I'd love, basically, I've just looked outside my window and I haven't seen a Ferrari. So basically, if I knew the answer to that, I'd be out there. I think that there is going to be a fragmentation. People talk about London. I talk about London no longer being the heart of the wine trade, and it isn't anymore. But also, what is going to the heart of the wine trade? And so, well, the heart is now spread. There's going to be some in Hong Kong, some in New York, some everywhere. And I think what we're going to see is, and we've seen this with bag in box already in Scandinavia and indeed in New Zealand, Australia, bag in box, or the cask, as they've said, has had a large chunk of the market. The interesting thing, here's a big question, who in the world of stupidity ever said we are going to put wine, that is nice stuff, that's part of a lifestyle, into a container that we are going to call a bag in box, which is the name used for it when it was battery acid for batteries. So in Australia, they were clever. In New Zealand, they call them casks. Yeah, in France, it's not so bad. It's a bib. It's not quite so bad. But bag in box is essentially unromantic. Why does this thing have to be 3 litres? In the UK, it has been. In Australia, New Zealand, again, they went for 2 litres. We have smallish fridges. We can't put one of those big white boxes into our fridges. So I think we're seeing an evolution in the size of those containers. That's very important. And I think that we're going to see more and more higher volume containers of one side. And it could be 2 liters, it could be 3, it could be different shapes and sizes. That's point. Secondly, in parallel, we're going to see these small single serving coming through, which I think is going to be important. And as far as the sommelier world is concerned, what I'm interested to see there is not at the top end, but at the bar end. There's so much, you're opening bottles all the time. And at some point or other, you are going to be storing half full bottles overnight, either in an expensive piece of gas-driven equipment or with argon or whatever. It seems to me that we are going to see better and better draft offerings for the on-trade. And we're going to go from having cheap and very ordinary wine on draft, because we've got draft beer. We have some very high-class draft beer that we look after pretty well, and we sell it for a high price. Why will we not have that? And I think that one of the people I'd love to give a shout out to here is Jean-Charles Boisset, who is one of the great innovators of the wine world. If anybody wants to deserve an award, he does, who actually started just putting a bag-in-box into a wooden barrel. But he was putting white Burgundy, he was putting nice wine, serious wine, I mean, at affordable level, into American restaurants and bars, onto the bar top in what looked like a barrel, but in a bag-in-box. And people loved it, I mean, with his branding on the front. Why don't we see more of that? So would you ask me which of these formats is going to be the answer? I'd love to say it's one. I think that over the next 10 or 20 years, we are going to see a proliferation. But part of that, and I think Stefan made the point very well earlier, we have on the one hand sustainability and glass. I'm sorry, we recycle bottles. We have all these different shaped bottles. Of course, it takes energy to make bottles. It takes energy to heat them up and turn them into more glass. So actually, I think we're going to see returnable bottles. I really would expect to go back to the good old days of the French liter bottle with the stars around it, and you've seen that in Scandinavia already, where I fill my wine up. My milk in my house, I live in the country in the UK, my milk arrives every day, or every 3 days, in little bottles. And we put the empty bottles outside, they take them away. Why should that not happen with my San Pellegrino if I were to buy it, and my bottles of wine, cheap wine, but daily drinking wine?
Well, that's a good point, actually. And I've been watching the sommeliers. Yeah, they've been like nodding and shaking their heads all while you've been talking, like, yes, oh, no, no, yes, yes. I think it's time to turn to them, because each of you come from very different countries with very different receptions towards alternative closures and packaging. Could you take a few minutes each to talk about your experiences on the floor and off it when it comes to issues of sustainability and innovation? And Tori, since you've already been bombarded a little bit here with the coming from New Zealand, Tori, just to introduce Tori, she has 10 years of experience from the hospitality industry and wine retail, and is currently working as an account manager for a fine wine importer distributor in Auckland, New Zealand. And the focus there is mainly on-premise. And obviously New Zealand is one of the pioneering countries when it comes to screw caps and alternative packaging. It's going to be very exciting to hear what you have to say about this, Tori, because you work with this on a daily basis.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. It's quite interesting having worked on the floor in a restaurant and retail, and now the distributor side. I've kind of seen a little bit of different angles of this, but I would say we're very used to screw cap here. There's like at least 70% of the wines you see here are screw cap. If you see a cork, you almost people think it's an international wine or it's an expensive wine, is kind of, I guess, the general kind of consensus out there in the public. Even sometimes if I take a wine with cork to a friend's house, I always have a wine knife because some of my friends don't have one because they're so used to screw cap. So we're kind of used, it's like, a cork, oh, this is fun, it's not. But then if you're in the wine world, you've got more of those wines, international wines, we're used to it. But it's more the people quite into wine that know how to use a corkscrew. As far as the other kind of, yes, and I agree with you, Robert. There are some very strong opinions here in New Zealand. I work with some winemakers. I won't name them either, but sometimes they're like black and white. They're this way or they're that way, or it's like Screwcap for the younger wines, cork is for aging, but they're very sure. But the other things that I've seen, vino lock, I've seen a couple of times. People tend to buy the bottles because they want to reuse them at home because they look cool. So that's kind of cool. But I've only seen about 2 different wineries in the last 5-10 years that have that here. Some restaurants are starting to do the draft thing. There's one place, Al Brown's restaurant in Sky City. He's had wine on tap for years and everyone thought it was weird, but sustainability wise, there's some of those restaurants with that focus are starting to ask that. And I have 1 or 2 winemakers that will do that on request. So there are certain wineries that have started to have that as an option, but it's not a default. Canned wine hasn't really taken off here, but the kind of younger generation of starting to drink those seltzers. I don't know if you've seen the can, and sometimes they're like Pinot Gris and soda. So I don't know what's going to happen with that generation. If they're used to drinking some kind of wine drink out of a can, maybe they're going to be okay with drinking canned wine when their palate develops and they get more into wine. So yeah, I think that's kind of what I've seen out there. Just a little bit of everything. And yeah, I think the draft thing makes sense for glass pours because I do know in a restaurant, keeping tabs of when you opened and what and the wastage, as well as financially, it also makes sense. So yeah.
Well, it's going to be very different from each country here, what the experiences are and what the future will bring also, I guess. And Nina is not any ordinary sommelier. She became the runner-up in the previous best sommelier of the world contest in Antwerp 2 years ago. And
I was there.
Yeah,
you were terrific.
To be honest, I think maybe you weren't there, Tori, but I think apart from that, everyone was there. Oh, Manu, were you there? Yeah.
I was
Yes.
not.
Everyone was there.
It was very good.
Everyone was there except from Tori. Tori, next time you come. But Nina is a comet. First time I saw Nina, I think it was your first competition, and in the Nordics in 2016. Yeah. I was lucky enough to be invited as a judge to the Danish or the Nordic Sommelier Championship, and I came there and boom, there was Nina and she won it. And then there was the Danish championship and she won it. And then there was another thing and she won it. She just won everything. And then she went to Antwerp and just became second. So she's now the head sommelier at the 2-star restaurant Alchemist in Copenhagen, busy opening up very soon. And Denmark, like the rest of the Scandinavian countries, is already very much into the alternative packaging and closures. And what's your experience in Denmark, Nina?
I would say, like, Scandinavia is in general a quite interesting country, simply because we are, I would say, very concerned with 2 things, especially among the young generation. We are concerned with sustainability, as I think you covered extremely well, Robert, but also image is a big thing here. I would even say that I find that image is something that is severely important to Scandinavians in a different way than in many other countries. But a part of that also means that we are very, very concerned with, first of all, like how the packaging looks, if we look at the private consumers of wines, but also a part of creating this kind of Scandinavian, I would almost call it woke image that we experience, especially in the cities. I think that would also be something you can like stretch out to maybe Stockholm and maybe Oslo, you would know better, Leora, but is that sustainability is something that we want to integrate into this image. So for us, there is a great division between the private consumers and what you see in fine dining restaurants. What you see in fine dining restaurants is leaning far more towards the traditional parts. We are still extremely locked into the thinking that the traditional bottle is the correct way to do things. And also traditional closures. So I would say for fine dining scene, there's still a lot of work to do. The change we have seen is towards that lighter bottle that you spoke about, Robert, is really, really important here. I would say it's almost a joke to sommeliers here in Scandinavia now. When we see a heavy bottle, we're like, oh yeah, super nice wine, huh? It has become like a joke on the winemakers to do that, because people are aware of the extra carbon footprint that bottle is going to cost, both in production and in transportation. So I would say that is a point where we are really, really acting upfront, but this thought really does not stretch outside of that in the restaurant world, at least. If you look at the private consumers, they have embraced the change very, very well. You can see that not only with wine, but also with other produce, that carbon footprint is something that we are extremely concerned about, and something that is starting also to be labeled on all the food produced from, I think it's next year. Like, what is the carbon footprint of this meat? What is the carbon footprint of this and that? So we will also definitely think about that with the wines then, if they're going to be labeled, because I think the thing is, most people consider wine not as much as an everyday drink as something you do for the weekends and when you want to spoil yourself. So when you want to do that, you want to drink something of a certain quality. Also, like, the average bottle price in Scandinavia is really, really high compared to many other countries. So that means that you want something that you, of course, connect with quality, but it also needs to match your sustainable thoughts. So that way, these cask wines have become increasingly popular. There are several places in Copenhagen now where you can go get your cask wine and feel both good about it with the carbon footprint, and also get some wine that is actually of decent quality, because they kind of focus on that. They know you cannot really sell the super low end stuff here. So a requirement to get into this market with the sustainable packaging would be to do it of a certain quality level. Also, that means that the whole question when it comes to the cans is difficult, because the cans simply does not move. We have seen people try it here. It is not successful because it does not add up when you think about the quality. People stamp it immediately as something cheap and looking like beer, and it does not belong in our heads as something that could be good wine. So that is simply something that still have a far, far way to go when we speak about how packaging is moving here in Scandinavia. One thing that I believe is extremely important if you want to market more alternative packaging and closures are what you put on the label itself, because that needs to be kind of smart looking. It needs to be informing of why you should pick this product. And if you can do that, do something that people feel nice buying, then I think it's a very easy market to introduce new things and to move new things.
But I'm curious, Nina, because obviously we are both from Scandinavia, and do you know the ratio of sales of bag-in-box towards bottles in Denmark?
It's rather high. Like in the supermarkets and in the homes, bag-in-box have been very, very popular. We have sadly seen a decrease in bag-in-the-box wine because people have increasingly spent more per liter. I think the numbers, I'm unsure about the total numbers, but I think it's about half the volume is sold in bag-in-the-box. So that is still a pretty good chunk, but I think it's worrying to see that that number is actually decreasing. Well,
I'm from Norway, and as opposed to Denmark, we have a monopoly system in Norway, and here we have more than 60% of all wine sold in bag-in-box. Yeah. But let's move on to another part of the world. Let's go to Mexico. And Manuel is a top sommelier from Mexico who keeps himself extremely busy. He has taken part in several contests, and he's an educator and a writer and a volunteer for ASI. So he's working a lot with the social media for ASI, as well as translating everything we do into Spanish. And he works as a sommelier at the wine bar by Concours Mondial de Bruxelles in Mexico City. And you just opened not that long ago during the pandemic, more or less. And Mexico has been a bit of a divided in attitude when it comes to closures and packaging, hasn't it, Manuel?
Yes, a lot, since here in Mexico, it's always changing the wine market. Like you guys, we don't have really this access to all of the winemaking countries like very fast, since we are the other side of the world, as Tori may have those issues to get French or Italian or Spanish wine like we do. But yes, here in Mexico, we don't really have a lot of bag-in-box. The only options I can think on only like 4 or 5 producers, and they are all from Chile and the US. So it's not easy for us to get bag-in-box. It has to do more like with the age of the consumer, because younger people are used to change and are like, oh, wine into cans or draft or the bag-in-box. Okay, let's give it a try. And people above 35 or 40, they are like, no, that's not gonna be good. So I'm not even gonna let it a chance. So that's a problem. And I think the whole industry has to adapt towards this kind of new packaging. As Robert Joseph was saying, we need more like the big names to venture into this. So people get used to it a lot faster, because if not, we are only going to see this alternative packaging for cheap wines. And it's a different experience if you get it for your home than if you're buying it for a restaurant. As a sommelier, yes, you are used to doing the whole ritual of opening the bottle and checking the wine and everything. So I don't think that's going to change a lot in the next few years, but yes, towards the home market. Because let's say if you're going to the countryside for a picnic or anything, canned wine, it's very good. It's a great option. So you don't have this issue of getting to the countryside and getting all ready for it. And then, oh, the corkscrew. I didn't bring a corkscrew. Well, of course, if you're a sommelier, that's not going to happen, because we all have our corkscrew, at least one in the car. So it's easy, but for common people that are not sommeliers, it's not very common to have corkscrew everywhere. So it's a great option. But what about the experience? You can't really taste the wine the same way into a can or let's say a beer bottle. There's a lot of winemaking and wine glasses making companies from Austria, from Germany, from Czech Republic, developing like Chef et Sommelier and the glass for having a good experience around the wine. And the alternative packaging are doing the exactly same opposite. You have to drink it like from the actual recipient. So it's going to be very interesting to see these changes here in Mexico. It's very weird because at the wine bar, we are used to open the bottles and give it like fast. There's a lot of winemaking companies here in Mexico that opt for this heavy on the wax and everything for them to look very good, very fancy, and so people choose it from the retail stores. So it's very, very crazy down here.
Well, I guess maybe Mexico is a bit more traditional than I thought it would be.
Yeah, because we have the oldest winery in the Americas, yes, but there's a lot of changes doing from the 1940s to now. We are a market of, well, my country is 126 million people, but we only have real market of 3.4 million people drinkers. So the potential market is 37 million. It's a really, really big market. The problem is you have to really dig into the core of the consumer, because if you manage to get them in love with your product, they're gonna like very married to it, and then explore many things around it. So canned wine will be a great option, I think, in the next few years. But many people here are very, very attached to the glass and the cork, and it's going to be a little bit difficult to take them out of it.
But basically what you're saying is that the part of the population that's drinking, they're very loyal drinkers.
Yeah, yeah, very loyal. So I see an opportunity there. If you are aware of this winemaking company that has these different options, the glass and the cork bottle for the restaurant, but also the cans or the bag-in-box or the another option for you to take to home, it's going to be, you're going to buy it because they already know you.
So you have basically a fairly young population of wine drinkers, in the sense that there's potential for so many more. And a country that does not have not young population of wine drinkers, but a country that has a lot of tradition for wine drinking is obviously Monaco. And Bruno Scarvo, welcome. And I want to tell you something about Bruno that I'm sure you didn't know. And that is that Bruno actually started his career as a cabinet maker. And I've seen samples of that, and it's absolutely amazing. If anyone has been to Monaco, to Hotel de Paris and Louis V there will be beautiful furniture. And that's the kind of furniture that Bruno used to make.
I was young.
Well, you still made them, and they're absolutely gorgeous, and it's just so much fun to get to know this. I had no idea. But when he was doing an internship as a craftsman in the wood, then he started working in restaurants to finance the end of his studies, and that was the point of no return for you, Bruno. And you have been working in the hospitality industry ever since. And you've took part in myriads of contests, both nationally and internationally. You've even been the president of the Monegasque Sommelier Association, and he's the wine referent and head of the wine think tank for the Monte Carlo SBM resorts. And Monaco, like I said, is probably one of the most traditional countries of all when it comes to closures and packaging, wouldn't you say, Bruno?
We have both. We have both now, but of course, I am a whole sommelier because I start in the 70s. I was thinking about Roberts. I started to be a commis sommelier in 77. So in this time, we had only a few content. We have half a bottle, and some magnums, but most of the magnum were for champagne. And we did even had some 20 centiliters for champagne, because at this time we didn't do even the champagne by the glass. Now things have changed a lot. So we passed by a different type of step. And now at the beginning we start to make a wine by the glass, but we didn't have any things to keep them very well. So only taking the airways, but now it's developing a lot, and it's become also like we are like a bit France, a bit more traditionally. So it's a bit longer for us to come to this part and of the new packaging. And I remember the first screw cap I had. It was 16 years ago. It was wine from New Zealand. Most of them was white. It was very difficult for us to buy some screw cap for red wine. But I remember in the casino we had one. The restaurant was open on New World food, so we had the 4 starter, 4 main course, and 4 desserts. And under the name of the dish, it was South America, Europe. And I remember we had a wine by the glass because we had a package, so it was very good for me to go on this wine. And I was reserving the screw cap for the wine by the glass, like that the customer didn't see the bottle a lot. And I remember we had a wine from Randall Graham, Bonidun Vineyards, called Ca del Sol. It was a blend of Italian grape, and it was entry-level wine. And I remember the new vintage arrived, and I was in the casino, and we saw the bottle. It had changed. It was a screw cap, and we didn't know that. So we were a bit annoyed. So I said, "What do we do with my sommelier?" I had my team with me, and I said, "What do? We take it away from the wine list and we do that by the glass, or we leave on the list?" So I said, "Okay, we are going to leave it because it's a good wine. People like it, and so what do we do?" there is a screw cap. Do we put in a basket? Because normally we, so it was just very funny ways, but we had to think about it. And we said, okay, but the bottle is a bit bigger. So for the basket, it's a bit difficult. I said, okay, you do like you feel with the customer. If you want to do it to put in the basket, you put in the basket. Otherwise, you stand on the table and I remember the first bottle we sold that, it was one of my sommeliers, and he said to me, Bruno, I sold the new screw cap wine. I said, okay. I was looking in my station, and then I was looking with him with the customers. So he went and he presented to the customers, and the customer, when they saw the screw cap, they said, no, we don't want this wine. We don't want this wine. So it's. So now it's a bit different because for a lot of white wine and as we have more foreign wine than we used to be because we were very classical, and we have a big cellar in the Hotel de Paris with 350,000 bottles, but mostly all the classic region and country. But now you can find some German wine, some Austrian wine with screw cap, and I think it's easier for people to accept it when it's white. When you go on a red wine, it's a bit more difficult because it's part of the cinema you make in the show you make in the dining room, and especially we have some customer who can afford some very expensive wine. So for them, it's very difficult to accept that you don't have a screw cap. And I remember I was in Chateau Margaux, it was a bit more than 15 years ago. I was talking with Paul Pontarlier when he was still alive, and we were talking about vinification, and he was telling me they were making some tests about Chateau Margaux with a screw cap to see how the wine was evolving. But you never seen a Chateau Margaux with a long
screw cap.
Obviously, didn't evolve that well. But
So
it's interesting to see that during the course of 16 years, it's become a little bit more acceptable in Monaco with the screw cap, at least on the whites. But there's still a way to go, obviously.
And we've seen also the content. At the beginning, we had only, then we passed for magnums, and now we have some Jéroboam and even Mathusalem of wine, even and champagne also. Of course, the champagne is a bit more easier, but for wine, for rosé, white, and red, now you can find some big on. So the people are changing, and also the label are changing. In the past, it was a bit more difficult because there were not this young new consumer coming from wine bars. They like bio-organic, organic wine, natural wine. So they are more easy drinking. They want to have fun with the wine, so they accept a new type of bottle, new label, because they want to have fun, and that was the beginning, I think, for evolving in the market. And some region also, in the past, this consumer was only focused on red Bordeaux, white Burgundy, Champagne. I am in the south of France, of course, rosé wine. But now they are interested in even some region that we didn't work. So like Savoie, Jura, we all at school when we were learning the wine, we were studying this region, but we didn't sell a lot. So because of that, and these young people, I think they bring some new things. And also the restaurant. Now the people, we have 5 restaurants. We have Star Michelin, and we have one of the restaurants is certified bio-organic. So people in Monaco are very focused on sustainability because of the prince, also because he has a foundation to look after that. And you are not allowed to sell some red tuna, an example. We don't have any plastic goblet or straw. Now we use corn with that. Even in the gardeners where I work, they are bio-organic. I saw them to put some Letterberg in the garden in the sporting, and I was very surprised. To delivery, because we have different hotel from the main cellar to the other part. We have electric cars. So everything is changed, and we adopt. Everything is trying to adopt a green attitude. And we were talking about the print, the carbon print. We receive some email, and they ask us what kind of car we use, how many kilometers do we do every day to come to work. So they are trying to
yeah, I understand. I think that what you're saying here is key, about also a little bit about the younger generation and wanting to have fun and enjoying the wine, and not being that serious about wine, because the older generation, wine is something special. Wine is something should be like that, served in a bottle with a cork, etc. Young people, they don't care that much about the traditional way of serving wine. They just want to enjoy it. And we have some questions here from the sommeliers to Stefan on closures and packaging. Nina, you had a question.
Yeah, I was wondering exactly, because you have inventions, you're so moving forward on the science. And I find it, I would love to know how you can actually conduct the experiments over time, because it needs time to actually check that the theories are working, and it needs quite a vast amount of cases too, to really confirm that it was not just a one case scenario, it works also on a broader spectrum. So I was wondering, how is the connection? How do you actually test it? And if the technology will not always lag behind, like what is on the market, because you need time to test it?
It's a very good question, Nina, and it's difficult to answer without going too much into technical details. But I will try to frame it very simply, if I can. But really, I told you I joined the company 15 years ago, something like this, and that was my main objective, to understand how we could predict, wine evolution. Because if you are always doing it, after testing for 20 years, you are just reactive, you're never proactive. So that's, and all the discussion we are having here about all sort of packaging, whether the size of the bottle, whether it's a bagging box, whether it's a screw cap or an inner seal, whatever. At the end of the day, what matters is wine quality. Because honestly speaking, if we go to any packaging and spoil the quality, then that's a disaster. Okay, so first thing to be sustainable also is no waste. We don't want to waste any wine. That's very important. So what we have decided to do is to really tackle this on a scientific way by building a very strong database. So we are screening all grape varieties that we can, have wines from different winemaking techniques. Everything I talked about, the academic partners consortium that we had at the beginning, to gather all the data in the same database. And that's very important, because we believe it was never done before. We had a couple of studies here and there, but nothing consolidated. We consolidated all our data on the wine science. Then we developed all our models on oxygen ingress and how much oxygen you can deliver in a very accurate way, and also something important, consistent way, because we want also to address bottle-to-bottle consistency and make sure that when we have a model of wine, we deliver the right amount of oxygen, but always the same. Not one bottle different than others, etc. All bottles should be the same at the end of the day. Okay, so the two angles: database on wine science, models on oxygen management, and by compiling this together, comparing with what natural cork can deliver, you can say, okay, with this potential of a wine to develop, because we can monitor what's inside. Okay, when the wine is finished, when it goes into the bottle, the wine is done. You are not going to put any new ingredient in it. The only one is oxygen. So you have a pool of precursors that is what your wine will become. It's just a matter of modulating what's inside the bottle with temperature. Not very good. Oxygen going in. Okay, that's light, for some closures through the glass can have an influence. But everything is in the bottle, and now is just unveiling what's in the body of the wine. So if you know the content, the starting content, and then you know how much oxygen you are going to develop with the models, you can predict that. And that's the approach that we have taken. Otherwise, we would have to run a test for 20 years to have something there. And by comparing with what a natural cork can deliver in terms of oxygen, we have screened all that, very broad range. This is why you have so much inconsistency that is happening, is that one cork is very different from another in terms of oxygen permeation. So you put all this information together and you can start predicting. And I would love to spend more time, Nina, on this and to explain that to you, because I think it's very, very interesting topic, but we need probably a little bit more time. And I know that you're a little bit stressed about the time, Laura, so I try to be right there. But I hope that I could answer your point, Nina.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I think that this is absolutely a subject for a whole masterclass, because there are so many findings that you have on this subject. Yeah. And
then we can taste the difference. Huh?
Exactly.
When we play with the different amount of oxygen on different wine material, then you end up with completely different profiles. And this is where I think the sommelier part is really coming into play.
Good. Manu, you also have a question, and we need to be a little bit brief on the answer. Sorry.
Yeah, so I'm going to be pretty straight up. What about sparkling wines? Because a lot of research and development has been done for still wines, but what about sparkling? So,
yeah, but it's very complicated with sparkling, honestly speaking, because I would say that the first thing is safety, and we need to be very careful. We go to some bottles that are up to 8 bars. Okay, so that's a little bit extreme, but you can have some. But average of 6 bars is very often encountered, and so we need to be careful. You know, even the light bottles are not an option with sparkling wine. They are potentially a bomb. So we need to be very careful. So any container that you have to deal with has to be super robust. In terms of closures, we have already solutions with Screwcaps. We have a line of Screwcaps in our inventions that can withstand up to 6 bars, and this is really based on one specific liner that is super forgiving for and resistant to pressure. So very important to address the pressure. But honestly, if we would love to be a little bit innovative on this, maybe it's not so much innovative, but we need to go back to the basics. We need to go with crown caps, because this is what is used to do the bottle aging in cellars, but it never goes to the consumers. Why that? Because crown caps is something that people are used to, and that would be easy. And then you know that you're safe. So maybe something to be discussed. I'm not sure that whether a lot of wineries will go to the market with the crown caps, but that could work.
You think they're going to put the small messages inside the crown cup like Coca-Cola does?
Who knows?
To be enjoyed at every moment. We have some questions for Robert as well, and both Bruno and Tori have been. They have a lot of questions, but unfortunately, we only have time for one question.
We can follow them up afterwards. We can do them online or some other way.
Yeah. So Bruno, maybe you could pick one of your questions for Robert.
Yes. When you launched the International Wine Challenge, Robert, did you notice some important percentage of wine with alternative packaging or closure?
Well, we launched it in 1984, so the dinosaurs were still everywhere those days. We didn't see any, in those days, we did not see anything that was not a cork. Then into the 90s, as we developed, and the competition started very small, but as we grew, the plastic, synthetic corks began to come in the mid-90s. And the UK still is, but was very much the center of innovation for wine. People would bring their new wines. We were also very much the place where Australia, New Zealand particularly, and Chile and so on, had their first successes in terms of exports, even before the US. So we saw the explosion on Sauvignon Blanc in Screwcap. But I remember, for example, Cloudy Bay were the slowest to get into Screwcap because they were in the UK. I actually brought some bottles of Screwcap Cloudy Bay back from New Zealand to the UK. I had the only ones in Britain. And one time we did a taste. So we were slightly slower on that. I think I would just pick up on something that Stefan said in terms of these answers. There's always going to be consumer perception. My own wines, we produce wines in Languedoc, which we sell in Screwcap in some countries and in corks in Diam, and indeed natural cork for China, where I'm forced to do it by the Chinese importers and I don't want to. In the US, we've discovered that for our wine that sells between $10 and $12 retail in the US, so it's not unlike that Bonnie Doon in a sort of way, the Cod del Solo, we do see people saying, no, it's got a screw cap. I think that looks cheap. And by the same question, the idea of Krug or Cristal with a crown cap is quite hard to get my mind around. So I think that we do have to think about something that still fits into the consumer perception, which we're all talking about. Whatever is technically good, which is Stefan's focus, if you like, as a technician, as a tester, we still have, and we have the sustainability, we still have to have something that gives the customer a good feeling when they're open.
I fully agree, Robert. And this is why we develop our closures always with 3 pillars: performance, design, and sustainability. And the design is really in the optic of staying very close to the consumer perception. Otherwise, we know that,
To finish your point, Bruno, I know you've got another question. What we did see was as screw caps came up, we never saw the problems of reduction that people talked about with screw caps. And in fact, I did a tasting of New Zealand wines once where we had a number, in the early days of screw caps, we had a number of reduced wines, and they were not the screw caps. They were actually wines that had been badly handled under cork, where the sulfur use, SO2 use had been wrong. So we definitely saw that evolution, but we never saw, unfortunately, we didn't see outside Australia, New Zealand, we never saw screw caps coming in with top wines, top red wines. Some Gruner Veltliners, some Rieslings, yes, but not reds. Laura, you're on.
Well, Tori, you have a question for Robert as well.
Yeah, mine kind of fits after that quite well. I read the Q&A on Le Grand Noir, and the images there are all of screw caps, so I kind of didn't know that you had the cork as well. But I just wondered that you'd written, one thing I did love actually is it said, how long should I age this wine? And it said, hopefully until you get home or something similar, which I thought was funny. But you wrote that you use screw caps to retain the freshness of the wine because it's ready to drink. I just wondered, seeing as it doesn't look like you had wine that you made to age, whether you think you would still use screw cap or whether you would be interested in cork for the aging quality.
Sorry, I have, I've been described as a vinous necrophiliac. Oz Clark is a good friend, and I used to compete with who had the oldest bottles of humble wine. Old bottles of Soave, old bottles of, and I'm not talking Pierre Pan, old bottles of supermarket Liebfrau milk or whatever, and we would just open them and find out what they were like. And astonishing, I've still got bottles of very early examples of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc under screw cap. Now, I'm from an age where you did not keep Sauvignon Blanc, you didn't keep Sancerre or Gris Fumé longer than 4 or 5 years because they went nasty, or with very few exceptions. So I believe in screw caps working better than cork, and certainly the modern iterations, and indeed I also believe in technical closures working better than cork, because we can, as Stefan is saying, you can say exactly how much oxygen is going to go into that bottle over a period of time. My problem is always going to be the perception of the wine I'm going to keep for a long time. How do I persuade somebody to buy my $25 or $55 wine? As Bruno's saying, they look at it, they see the screw cap, they think it's not serious. So you can see I can put a Bourgogne Passe du Grain, or as it was, sort of with the lowest level of vinous life in Burgundy, and I turn up with that, with a cork, and people take it seriously. But I put my Clos Vougeot with a screw cap, and they go, oh. But I would rather, personally, have the Clos Vougeot under a screw cap.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's interesting.
Well, our time is running out, but I just wanted to say thank you, everyone so much for joining us today. All of you, obviously, but also everyone who's been following this webinar today. I think everyone learned quite a lot about closures and packaging around the world and what the perception of these are in the different parts of the world, basically. And sustainability has been one of the things that has been, well, one of the main topics, I would say, today. People are very focused on sustainability, and sustainability can refer to aspects beyond the environmental, I would say. And in the case of our May theme, we will be looking at the importance of sustainability among practices and people, specifically legacy. The transference of traditions and ideals from parent to child, mentor to mentee, and even from institution to individual is increasingly complex. And we're going to talk to restaurateurs and wineries and SOMMs, obviously, and even those in the ASI board, concrete ways to pass the torch and honor the past while still embracing the future. And we will have guests, including Catherine Larson from the UK/Denmark. We have a ASISomms with us, Joseph Dafana from Zimbabwe. And we will have a Belgian restaurateur, Andy de Brouwer. His family has had the same restaurant in generations in Belgium. And we even have the 5th generation American-French, Dustin Chabert, who's also been in the restaurant trade with his family forever. In addition to that, Rob Symington of the legendary Graham's Port and Mathieu Perrin of the renowned Rhone Valley Estate family Perrin, both gold partners of ASI. Obviously, those who are in wine know that they are families with long traditions and legacies. So that will be our next month's topic. I hope you will follow us then. For those of you who came in late today, this webinar will be on YouTube in hopefully not more than a couple of days, so you can watch it all again. And if you should have any questions, just please feel free to put them in the commentary field on Facebook. Well, thank you for joining today. And packaging and closure, that's what we have to think about for the future, I think. All sustainable, obviously.
I'll do my best to answer any other questions we didn't have. And can I just wish all the sommeliers out there watching this, it's been a very hard time for all of you, I know. And it may not be immediately easy for everybody. So I'm just wishing you all the very best of luck over the next few months and years.
Thank you very much, Robert. That was very nice. Hopefully we'll be seeing a more normal world in 6 months from now.
Thank you so much, guys. Bye-bye.
So much. Bye-bye.
Very nice to see you. Bye.
Bye.